All right, everybody, we're going to get rolling here in just a second.
Everybody listen up.
Tyler.
Listen up here.
Tyler's voice projects much better than I do. Thank you, Tyler. All right, so we want to welcome everybody tonight. This is our 6th DC704 meeting, so very exciting. It's awesome. So I see a lot of familiar faces and some new ones. How many are here for the first time tonight? All right. Well, welcome. So for those that don't know, DC704 was primarily driven by Britton over here at the camera. He put the work in to get this group rejuvenated and to get going again. So let's give him a big hand for everything he does. And then, of course, the reason we're able to meet here tonight, we are sponsored by Triaxiom Security. Tonight we have J.R. Johnson and Matt Miller, two of the principals here. So we want to thank them for their donation. And they make having this space possible. So we're very excited. We do this every month. It is the third Monday of every month. That's right, right? Yeah, third Monday of every month. And so we like to keep it a mixture of technical topics and just general business cybersecurity stuff. So tonight we have Solomon. He is doing the Demystifying Automotive Security. And I know a lot of you here know me. I love cars. I've been really looking forward to hearing about this. So without further ado, we will turn the stage over to our lead presenter, Solomon.
Hey guys. So today's talk is going to be a beginner talk, but we are going to get a little bit into everything about cars up to, not to the modern era, but up to where the modern era is now. So essentially we're going to talk about everything except for smart keys. So I'd like to start with a thesis question, which is, why can't I just hammer a flathead into the ignition of my car, crank it over, and drive away? Or to put it differently, what are the different things that are stopping me or somebody else from stealing my car, right? So there's a few things that we're not going to go through today. One thing that we're not going to do is we're not going to learn how to steal a car. Sorry. We're not going to learn how to bypass an immobilizer system. And then just for brevity's sake, we're also going to not learn about sub-gigahertz remotes. You might know this as like remote entry. Smart key technology, aftermarket alarms, EEPROM flashing, or ignition removal. Although all of these are things that we might talk about in the future and are important to know how to do if you ever want to make a key for a car without having one. So what are we going to learn? We're going to learn about automotive keys and locks, just a basic overview on how they work and how they're different from a residential lock. We're going to learn about how an immobilizer works, what an immobilizer system is and why it's in cars. And then we're going to learn a couple of other layers of automotive security and alternatives to the immobilizer system, just kind of a taste at what other things are out there. Finally, we're going to wrap up with a quick little walkthrough on what I would do as an automotive locksmith if I showed up at a job where you lost your key and don't have one, and I have to make you one. So let's get into a little bit of background about me. My name's Solomon Sasser. On Discord, I'm Gardenboat, and I usually go by Sol. I'm a certified locksmith. I was an automotive specialist for about 3.5 years. Right now, I'm working as a commercial locksmith on large, high-security systems and protected keyways. I also love hardware hacking, tinkering, soldering on electronics, and for a short time, I worked as an access control and camera tech. Basically, if it's offensive physical security, I'm interested in it. So first, let's go ahead and look at keys and locks. Now, on a couple of the tables up here, I've put some. Scott, would you hand those to the people behind you? But feel free to go ahead and take a key home with you. If you don't get one, there's definitely enough for everybody in this room. That's the little token that you guys get. Most of the time, it is a key to a car. There is a car somewhere in the world that key will unlock the door of, for sure. Like it's gonna happen if you just try them all. So first of all cars, even new ones, even ones with smart keys, do have a lock and they do have a key. You might not know about it, but inside of every smart key somewhere, there's a physical key. And even if it's hidden behind a shroud, somewhere on your car on the outside is a physical lock that you can use to unlock and get into your car. They did this because people's battery dies. and you still have to get into your car and drive home. So all locks, even if they're really hard to remove, can be removed, and all ignitions, even if they're even harder to remove, can still be removed. This can take sometimes 5 seconds, this can take hours, but no matter what, you can always get it out of the car. So what do you think of when you think of the word lock? Most people are going to imagine something like this. A lot of you have probably seen a diagram like this. This is a pin and tumbler lock. That's what you have on most commercial buildings and all residential buildings. They have 2 stacks of pins held up by springs, and the key pushes them up to where a shear line forms in between the 2 pins. That's not how car locks work. Car locks are wafer locks. Up here is a wafer lock that is actually not from a car, but we're going to use it as our demonstration anyways. And wafer locks only have 1 component. All they have to do is just line up at the top, and then the lock can turn. It's a pretty simple concept. Here we have a couple of locks that I'm going to go ahead and pass around to everybody. You guys get the Lexus. So if you look through the top there, you'll see the pins. Cool. And we'll start this one on this side, and you guys can just pass it all around. Here, take it that way and then back, if you don't mind. Cool. All right, so since the 90s, almost all keys in cars have been double-sided. If you look at the keys that were passed around, you'll see that they're not just cut on one side like a residential key, but there will be cuts on either side, or you'll see a groove in the middle. It makes them easy to pick because you can usually just kind of jiggle something around in there and stuff will line up, but it can make them relatively hard to decode. Up to 4 rows of wafers in each lock, so while it seems like they're just easy to pick, you can have as many as 24 different positions that you have to pick just to get into a door. And some ignitions just can't be picked. They use a sidebar system that's held behind an entire metal wall. The only way to get to that sidebar is to drill through everything. And you're just not going to pick it. You're going to get it out of the car before you do. So here's some examples of high security car keys. In car keys, high security keys refer to keys that have sliders. Usually these are internal track, but there are some that use an external track, like Honda keys. There's really not that much that's different between these and regular security keys, except for there's more pins, generally. Another thing that we have here is the transponder key. So a lot of the keys that you'll have will have a plastic head to them. These are going to contain an empty portion in them where you'll put the transponder chip, which we'll discuss in a minute. Boom. So before we go into anything else, we're going to talk about how we would decode a key if we don't have one. There's the leashy, which is a very popular tool, blind codes, tryout keys, which essentially are a box of every key that they've ever made for that car. And as a locksmith, you sit there and you try out every key until you eventually turn the lock. Key impressioning, which is a pretty complicated process that we're not going to talk about today, but might be a future talk for us. It's pretty interesting and fun to do, but it can also be really tedious. And also I have a coworker that would know more about that than me. And then the last way that we do it is we just take it apart and we read the wafers. It's more common than it should be, but there's a lot of locks out there where the leashies are really expensive for and the process is really hard for, and it's pretty easy to just take it apart and dump everything out. Cool. Today, we're really going to focus on these 2 things, leashying and blind codes. First of all, blind codes. So a blind code is a set of number and letters that represent the direct code or the direct bidding of a key. So that would be the actual cuts and the depths. And here we have a couple of examples of both. So on the locks that we'll pass around, whoever has it at the moment, you might be able to notice a blind code on that lock, but we'll look at a couple other up here. Blind codes can be found on the door lock, glove box lock, trunk lock, or the ignition, but never on all of them, with some exceptions, basically early Hondas. If you have an early, like 1998 to 2004 Honda, every lock and ignition in your car has the key code stamped on the side of it. Sometimes, and this is again usually with older cars, the blind code is in the owner's manual, but I worked as an automotive locksmith for 3.5 years and I never once saw a blind code in an owner's manual or on a piece of paper. It was always hard to get. All right, so this is a couple examples of blind codes. Both of these come from, both of these come from Lexuses. So these numbers don't mean anything. They're just representations of what the actual numbers are. The only way that you can get the actual numbers is by going through a key database to look up the codes. So that's something that automotive locksmiths have access to. You generally can't get access to those databases without without a locksmith's license. There's no such thing as an automotive locksmith license, by the way. Here's a couple of other blind codes. These are on ignitions of GMs. You can see they can get kind of hard to read, especially when they use the stipple. If anybody thinks they can read that, I can tell you what the numbers are later. This one, by the way, is not an 8, it's a B.
Is that Braille?
No, it's reverse Braille. What do we do? That's good. That's really good, yeah. So what do we do if we don't have a blind code that we can use? Like in that last picture, you know, sometimes it can be kind of hard to see what this is. You know, working long enough, I know it says S263B, but it can take a while of looking at it. And if you also look at how zoomed in this is my thumb here, they're pretty small. So it takes a while to get good at just reading them. And if you don't have one that you can read, there is still a way, and it's the Leashy. So the Leashy is a great tool. I'm gonna go in a little bit of the history of it. Yeah, we got it right here. So the Leashy is a great tool. It was invented by a guy named Mr. Lee over in China in the year 2000. He was an automotive locksmith for over 30 years who was really frustrated at how hard decoding automotive locks could get. And so he wanted to create something that went around it. And his solution was the Leashy tool. You've probably seen them before for automotive locks if you've ever seen any sort of other physical security demonstration, but automotive is really where they shine. When residential, you'll hear the opinion a lot that they're just kind of cheat codes, but in automotive, they're necessary. Like there's a lot of things that you just can't do unless you have a Leashy. Using a Leashy. It's a pretty simple step-by-step process, but it can get pretty nuanced once you actually put your hands on one. If we have time at the end, I do have a vise up here with a Leashy in it, and if you want to come try it out, well, we have the opportunity for you to give it a shot. But in general, you pick the lock. With the lock still turned, you go ahead and you decode the lock, and then you put those numbers into that same program that you would use with the blind code. But this time you're doing it the other way around. You have your direct code, and you need to verify that there is a blind code that exists for it. Because if Ford never made a key with that bitting, it's not going to work anything on the Ford you just decoded. You did your job wrong every time. I believe here we got, yeah, all right, so this is a demonstration here of somebody using a Leashy just to get into the car. You can hear the clicks there, and when you get good at using it, this is about how fast it happens.
Probably gonna go off, maybe. Nope. All right, you wanna get the.
Is that your demonstration?
No, so right there, credit to 84 Locksmith on YouTube for that. He's a great resource to watch how automotive locksmiths do their thing, and also to give you an idea of pricing around the country. He works in the Midwest, and it'll help keep you from getting scammed in some cases. So it's definitely a valuable place to go and watch some videos. This is just a little bit of what that decoding software that I've mentioned a couple times looks like. On the far right here, this is actually on my phone. It's just a screenshot of the app that I would use to interact with our key cutter. So all of that has it built in. Usually if you buy a key cutter, you'll have access to those codes, but there is also standalone machines here. This one I mainly just got so we can give you a demonstration of what a blind code looks like, and there's the direct code that corresponds to it. This is from me having an incomplete direct code, and I had to punch in just the numbers I did have, and it gave me back all of these as optional keys. That's why we have a big bucket of cut keys here. It's because sometimes this is as little as you can limit it to, and then you just have to cut 10 keys. All right, so why do we need to go decode the key in the first place, right? We've gone on about it for a little bit now, but if you can get into the car, that means you can probably turn the ignition over too. But like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of ignitions that we can't pick. And even if we can pick them, ignitions aren't in really friendly places to use a lockpick. They're over on the side and kind of facing down, and you really have to contort your body around the steering wheel, and you're just not gonna have that fun of a time if you go that route. So we should always wanna cut the key first. After we have it though, it'll finally let us start interacting with the immobilizer. So, what is an immobilizer? An immobilizer comes in two different parts. have a good example here. One is the antenna. This sits around the ignition, just like so that when you put the key in, it can read the chip that's inside of the head of your key. The other part of it, right here, is the module. This might be standalone like it is in this PEPS unit, but it could also just be a part of the ECU. This is where essentially the pin data is going to be stored. Sometimes it can be a little bit more obfuscated than that. Sometimes it can be completely plain text. But in general, that's how it works. Passcode stored here, passcode stored here. You put them together, now your car can start. Cool. And the last important thing is that it only ever checks this to read this data when you've turned your key to the on position. So again, if you're picking it, you have to pick it to the on position while holding the transponder there at the same time so that the second you get it turned over, it reads the chip. Otherwise it says, oh, I don't read a chip, sorry, you have to start again. So there's a lot of different names, a lot of different protocols for immobilizer. There's the PAT system, the PAPS system with a P instead of a T. There's Scream, there's VATS. There's a lot. There's 3 different iterations of VATS. All of them use the same principle though, which is a pin code system. You know, there's a hexadecimal data stored on the chip inside of this key, and it checks to see if it's the same one that the car knows already. And if they're wrong or if they don't exist, then it won't work. Yeah?
The VAT system is actually a resistor.
So you're right, that's actually a kind of a contentious thing. So VATS 1 is a resistor system. VATS 2 is also a resistor system, and VATS 3 is the one I meant to refer to here. Yeah, but technically the modern transponder system they use is still a part of their VATS catalog. It's just the 3rd iteration of it. Transponders. Transponders are the RFID chip that is inside of your key. So they can look something like this or like this. Same 2 things we have up here, don't squint. This stores the pin that the immobilizer needs to read to let your car start. It's kind of just the other half of the same puzzle. In the same way that you have a lock and a key, you have a transponder and an immobilizer. One thing that's important though is that these are not rolling codes. So in any sort of system, even in a smart key system, if you have a transponder in it, which it does, that will not roll. Somebody can copy it and can replay it later on their own chip with really no recompense to you. The only issue is that these are RFID, which means that they're extremely short range. So they basically have to have access to your key already to make a copy of it, in which case they probably have access to your key already and they can just steal your key. So in a lot of cases, it's stored on a separate chip, like these 2 are up here, but in some cases, like in smart keys or in some remote head keys, it'll actually be embedded onto the circuit board itself. And then finally, it's usually not rewritable. Once you've learned a key to a car, it's done, it's burnt. It has the bits flipped at the end of it and it cannot be unflipped. It is now tied to that car forever. There are some exceptions to that, but it's a good general rule. In fact, all of this are general rules. Car companies are very proprietary and they like to switch things up a lot of the time and change just one small detail about how everybody else does things. And it's what they like to do. So to go over it once more time, key goes into the ignition and you turn it to the on position. The car powers on the antenna and it checks for a transponder, and if present, it reads the data. And then finally, the module verifies that data read by the antenna and decides if the car is allowed to start or not. This is basically a slide I made so people could get pictures if they'd like. So the only other thing that's really on here that is new data is this right here. Many different transponders. This whole box right here was the carry box that I used as an automotive locksmith. So it has 24 in it, and I was always going back to the shop for more. These will cover most of the most common cars, but there's still a lot of other transponders out there, each of them with their own protocol or data structure, each of them with their different bit length. So it really does matter that you have the right hardware in order to do this. There are things called super chips, which can emulate a couple of different chips, but only if you pre-program them. So it's essentially like an FPGA chip, if any of you know what that is, but just scaled down to the RFID size. All right, other automotive security features. The first one that we're going to talk about is the original VAT system, VATS 1 and 2. GM from 1986 to 2005 in select models decided it would be a really cool idea if they cut a hole in the blade of their key and put a resistor there. And instead of using a transponder, it uses the different values of the resistor. I think there's 13 or 15. There's 15. 14? Yeah, because 1 through 15, you're right. There's 14 different resistance values for it, and it was a really bad system. A lot of people that when I tell them that, they ask me, well, is it because the resistors would burn out in the keys? And you would think that, but it's actually not. It's because they can receive so much interference after the resistor that it'll drop enough resistance or gain enough extra resistance that the car will be like, nah, this isn't right. No, it's not a 3, that's a 4. Get out of here. Yeah. There's a lot of just like crosstalk. Smart keys, they use a rolling code remote, but like I mentioned earlier, the static transponder inside is still just a regular static RFID transponder. So if you've ever, if the battery's ever gone dead in your smart key before, and you've had to go ahead and push the button using the key to get your car to start, that is you no longer using the rolling code sub-gigahertz, and instead using the static RFID chip that's on your circuit board to start the car. And then finally, EEPROM stored transponder information is where things get really fun and is definitely something we'll be talking about in the future. This information can't be read with a programmer because it's encrypted, and that encryption key is stored on the EEPROM of the ECU. So you can't take it off of it. EEPROM stands for electronically erasable, programmable, read-only memory. So you can't write new chip data to it. You can find out what the old chip data is, but you can't store new chip data on it unless you actually take the ECU and flash it directly, essentially hardware hacking it. All right. Now we're going to go through a quick walkthrough of what it would be like for me to come up on a job. In this case, we're going to choose a Hyundai, because that's what I have here, and what I would need to do to make a key for it. First thing we would do is we would go to the door and we would leashy it. From there, we would decode the lock, put the numbers that we decoded into a dictionary to verify that the blind code exists, or if we had to, we would take the lock apart, read the biddings directly, and then verify that blind code exists for that direct code. Step 1.5, something I didn't mention, turn off the alarm. No car will start if the alarm is going on. It shuts down the immobilizer system. It's kind of a precedent that happens before the immobilizer is even allowed to engage. So if you have a car alarm going on, most cars, most modern cars, will not let you start. You might have seen some models before of people driving down the street with the car alarm going off. There's exceptions to all of these rules, okay? But a lot of the cases, if you set off the alarm, if you break the window and reach inside and pull the handle, or you use a car door unlock tool and you pop the door and the alarm starts going off, you're stuck there till it deactivates. Step 2, prepare your new key. So we have the code, now we need to cut the key, and then we also need to figure out which chip goes to the car and put it in it. Now, I should have said Lexus because I chose Hyundai, and Hyundais don't use transponder keys. But if it was a Lexus, we would get out our correct chip and we would put it in there. I think it's ironic because I'm pretty sure I have a transponder key for that lock. This is what my key cutter looked like, the one that I would use for automotive. It's called a Condor, and as you can see, it's essentially just a mill. It's a computerized mill. All I had to do was just put in that blind code that I found, and it would do the rest of the work for me. It's pretty nice to not be in the old days of manual cutting. Step 3, program. Another thing that we haven't really talked about, again, because it's the part that really I'm not supposed to talk about, but, but we use something like this. This is an Autel KM100 to go ahead and program the chip to the car, which is usually fine and usually just a few taps on a tablet, but sometimes it can involve a little bit of electrical work first. This is a up-close photo of an aftermarket ignition that was not working properly that I had to go ahead and remove from the car, which meant cutting a lot of wires and cutting a lot of the right wires. And then finally 4, profit. Unplug your programmer, crank the car, and hope it starts. If it didn't, you got to go back to the beginning of the programming. And that's about it. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
Is there like a license for you to get these items or not?
So
Anybody can get it just to steal cars?
there's, you can buy anything if you're determined enough. Yeah. Most of the distributors of especially the key programmers will only sell to locksmiths. Now, there are some general mechanics programmers and diagnostic tools that have some key programming abilities, but then they generally don't have access to the key cutters. I would say that that's the real bottleneck in automotive is having a high security milling key cutter.
How does one prove they're a locksmith?
You get certified. So in North Carolina,
Certifying body locksmith.
yeah, North Carolina has their own licensing board. So you would contact them. You can apprentice for 2 years or 3 years before taking the test. And then you take a test, pay, I think it's $500. Is that right?
It was $100 for the actual test, and then they raised the fee since then to
I think I paid 5.
the renewal was like 200.
Gotcha. And then if I think you only have to get like an 80% or better, and then you're a certified locksmith. You can also at that point have people apprentice under you if you'd like to. Yeah. Anything else?
How does it work with like the Teslas or things that don't have?
Right. So Teslas are, like I said, there's exceptions to all of this stuff, right? So Tesla is one of the first companies to ever make a car that has no physical key backup whatsoever. The idea is that if you lose your key completely, you call Tesla and they unlock it remotely for you since they have access to that part of the system. However, a buddy of mine who is an automotive locksmith for dealerships mostly, he did have a lockout / key make for a Tesla once where they went to a national park and their battery died in their Tesla where there was no like reception whatsoever. So he ended up bringing a satellite modem all the way out there and a car battery and jumped it long enough for the satellite modem to connect and have them unlock it that way. Yeah. Yeah.
So what would happen if somebody like modded their car, so where you have like a Nissan door lock, but the transponder is from like a different brand entirely?
So that
Like, is that just something you kind of have to figure out?
it would require a lot of work. So at that point, I think you'd essentially be modifying the actual like data on the ECU to have it be able to accept that different company's transponder key and whole system. Like it would be a whole lot of work to do, but I do think it could technically be possible to Frankenstein some stuff together. It would just it'd be above my pay grade. Yeah. Right.
How does it work for like self-driving vehicles? Not to say like Waymo or Robotaxi. Is it kind of like the same thing as Tesla, where they remotely unlock it?
So the actual vehicles that Wago uses and stuff.
Yeah, like how like let's say I lock myself out of my Waymo and
Mhm.
the AI isn't smart enough to unlock the car or something, and I need someone to unlock it. What do I do?
So I honestly, I don't have a complete answer for you. I do know that tech support can unlock the vehicles remotely, but I would imagine they would probably call a locksmith like me out, and if I couldn't pick a lock, then I would be putting airbags in it and popping it from the inside handle. Yeah.
Have you ever had to do that before?
Yeah. Oh, many times. There's a lot of cars that it's just not worth it to pick in a lot of cases, especially older cars. One thing about being a locksmith in the field is you're not working with anything new. So stuff can be grimy and corroded. You have people that have used the remote to unlock their car since they bought it 20 years ago. And you try to put a pick in there and you turn a little bit and you hear the crunch and it's like, okay, I don't think I'm gonna work with this. Yeah, so there was a lot of times where I would just opt to just popping the door that way. It's usually, I was pretty good at it. So I could do it without damaging the door at all. And it only took me a few minutes. So it was, yeah. It's usually on them. You want your car or not. I mean, yeah, but I would always add to that, I'll do my best not to damage anything, but no promises. Yeah. There's one over here. Yeah.
So if you were to theoretically acquire one of the devices that you have, is it like the Celebrate devices where you need a special software key to use?
So it completely depends on which brand you're going with. Autel is a more forgiving brand. They do make you register with their website, and you do have to provide a locksmith license for them. I don't know how well they verify that, but a lot of the way that they keep it out is by only distributing through dealers that allow locksmiths and then charging a lot of money. So, yeah.
For a standard call out, how much, what are we talking about
If we're talking about like just a key and ignition system like this, and you just all key lost, you just lost your key, probably between $150 to $200, depending on how much work it is and how far away you are. Yeah, yeah, and that's the general going rate.
This is kind of an aside. You mentioned all keys lost. Some of the more fun or powerful parts of these programmers
Mhm.
can sometimes be locked behind a passcode given by the manufacturing company.
Absolutely.
Record your make, model, who you are, what you're doing, when you're doing it, and store that in case that vehicle goes missing.
Yeah, yeah, this machine keeps a log of everything that it programs. So if there was, say, a string of car robberies and the police got a warrant for my house and they searched it and they found this, they would tell them everything I did on it. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
What does this stuff look like at the black market level? Like,
So, no, it's a good question. It is. It's the right place to ask that question, I would say. So there's a lot of crazy, fun, and cool stuff you can do. A lot of it has to do with abusing CAN communication. There are OBD. So this is an OBD port. This is what plugs into your car for diagnosing. You can get a device that is about this size that plugs in, interacts with your phone, and allows you to emulate, program new keys, do all sorts of stuff like that. They're sold with varying legality around the world. They're hard to get, and they're harder to get without getting scammed. Yeah. Cool. If that's it, then thank you guys so much. Yeah. Cool.
All right, thank you, Saul. As I'm sure you
Absolutely.
can imagine, it takes a lot of guts to get up here, so one more round of applause.